but does it feel like maybe the formula is out, that someone has figured out how to stop Creighton?
To a degree, yes. I think obviously if you've got the personnel to be able to do it, get up, be physical with them, disrupt their actions, make life miserable for their ball handlers because they are limited in that aspect. And that's what we saw Xavier do, just like a lot of teams where they've been really physical at the point of attack. They swarmed Kalkbrenner. They've played at the line between fouling and playing physical good defense based on where the officials determine where that line is.
You're listening to the Blue Jay Breakdown.
Welcome back, Blue Jay Breakdown here for Hurrdat Sports. I'm Austin Jacobsen, filling in for Anna Bellinghausen once again. Jacob Padilla joining us, and a split week for the Creighton men. Let's start kind of at the top there because it felt like it was maybe more of a disappointment than anything.
Yeah. And that was kind of a game where, I mean, Kirk McDermott even said it after the game. You guys think this is good enough? We're kidding ourselves. Couldn't let kind of some of the things that slipped in that game carry over into the next one. And unfortunately, they kind of did. So, yeah, they only get out with a 10-point win over DePaul. It was kind of close for a while. They stretched it out. And then DePaul, to their credit, they didn't quit. They kept battling. They, again, cut it down to a 10-point margin at the end of the game. You had the two your two senior leaders play well, carry the load, but didn't get a whole lot else outside of those. I think it ended up not mattering. I think probably one of the positive takeaways there is you got Fedor Zugic, a career high 23 minutes on the court, and he put in 9 points there and was a rimmed out 3 away from his first double-digit game there. So that was a good one. But yeah, overall, just wasn't as sharp as you would have liked to see against a team like DePaul.
And like mentioned, a win that Wednesday night at home, 75-65. And it was one of those uneasy kind of post-game press conferences. Yeah. And like you had said, Mac definitely was not happy about it. But I'm not sure that the spirits rose in a trip to Cincinnati than on Saturday either, as Creighton lost at Xavier 83-61 on Saturday. It just never felt like anything was really in sync for Creighton from the start.
Yeah, the first half, it was kind of nothing's going right for Creighton on either end of the court. Like Xavier got to a good start quick, knocked down a few shots early on, jumped out to 8-4 lead, up 11-6. And then the rest of the half was all Xavier hitting some tough shots. Creighton wasn't able to score. Ended up getting down big, 18, I think, at one point in the first half. Got down to 22 in the second half. Creighton showed some fight. They answered with this, responded with the 16-2 run to make it an 8-point game. Then kind of had an opportunity to go out and push it even more. And Ty Davis out there mentioned Fedor Zugic. Good to see him get extended run in the first game against DePaul because he had played 20 minutes against Xavier in the first game, was an important piece of that. He was sick and was not able to play in this game, so they were without him, trying to piece things together. He had Ty Davis playing the 2 alongside Stephen Ashworth. He had Mason Miller out there for extended minutes. Didn't really work either one, but Ty out there trying to do his job, got a rebound, tried to push the pace, and just kind of dribbled in traffic. They got a turnover, got a kind of a broken play 3, and then that pretty much ended the run there where Xavier responded 12 straight, and that was ball game at that point. So it just one of those games where nothing was going right, but on the other hand, Creighton made a lot of mistakes on its end itself that perhaps contributed to Xavier getting as hot as they did. There were guys getting back cut, ball watching, guys not communicating. It just wasn't a sharp performance. And then obviously the shooting woes continued. They got Kalkbrenner going in the second half after kind of a sluggish first half there, but nobody else joined him. He's the only one in double figures in the entire game, finished with 23 and 12. So you just didn't get nearly enough from Stephen Ashworth and Jemiah Neal in order to have a chance in that game with Xavier playing as well as they did.
And I'm glad you bring up, obviously, Stephen Ashworth. You mentioned him from the DePaul game. He was probably one of the 2 players that actually performed up to the standard in which Creighton expected them to be. But then Saturday took a significant step back, especially in production. Does Stephen need to play like Creighton's best player for the Blue Jays to continue to have success, especially now that we're into March?
Not necessarily like their best player, but they rely on him so much. There's so much on his shoulders. It's hard to, when he does have an off game, it's hard to put too much on him, but they can't get a combined 17 points on 21 shots from Ashworth and Jemiah Neal. Jemiah Neal had 4 turnovers, only 3 assists. So you get that kind of production out of those two. They've got almost no shot against any team at this point in the season with where the roster is. You need those guys. You can have maybe one of the bench guys step up, like if Jemiah has an off day, you get Isaac Trout 12 off the bench or whatever, or Jackson McAndrew gets hot or whatever. You can make up for one of those guys maybe not having a great game, and we've seen that throughout the season. When both those guys are struggling to the degree that they did to just create offense, Creighton's going to have a tough time hanging with, again, teams that can actually score at a decent rate.
Now, of course, Creighton hasn't been perfect this season. I mean, that's obvious, from their beginning stretch of the year to where they are now. Their past 6 games have been a little bit more alarming, more concerning. But does it feel like maybe the formula is out, that someone has figured out how to stop Creighton?
To a degree, yes. I think obviously if you've got the personnel to be able to do it, get up, be physical with them, disrupt their actions, make life miserable for their ball handlers because they are limited in that aspect. And that's what we saw Xavier do, just like a lot of teams where they've been really physical at the point of attack. They swarmed Kalkbrenner. They've played at the line between fouling and playing physical good defense based on where the officials determine where that line is, and teams have taken advantage of that. And Creighton, we saw early on, you kind of had the book there for limiting Kalkbrenner, and Creighton didn't have an answer early. Eventually, they kind of worked through that and found a way to make him involved and turn him into All-American again in terms of production. He's having a great season. So they kind of worked their way through that. Now they've fallen back into, all right, teams are able to take away kind of their pet actions. And yeah, Kalkbrenner eventually got loose, but they were behind by so much already at that point, and nobody else got going because of the physicality. And again, missing Zugic as an option there hurt in that regard too, because now you really do only have 2 ball handlers that have the ability to create anything on their own. So that is definitely, I think anybody that looks at this team, that's what you have to do. At times we've seen them be able to beat that. So it's not necessarily, this is all you have to do to beat Creighton. Creighton's still good enough to beat that style of defense, just not consistently at this point. And that's what we're seeing. We're falling back into kind of some of the issues we saw early in the season. That's kind of probably the thing for concern. Kind of pointed out like some of the underlying issues that we need to talk about. And 3-point shooting is one of them. And then handling the physicality on the ball is the other. And you look at 7 of the last 8, they're under 33%. 6 of them under 30%. They're shooting just under 29% on over 28 attempts per game over their last 8 since the first Xavier game where they went hot in the second half, went 8 for 10 to kind of take control of that game. So that's what we saw early in the season, where this is a 3-point shooting team that wasn't hitting threes at a good enough rate. And so that's probably the most concerning thing is over these last handful of games, we're seeing the issues that showed up early in the season that kind of we thought that they had worked through. And now they're popping back up again when you need to be playing your best basketball. So they got 2 games left. That's what they're going to have to work through. They're going to have to figure out, all right, what is leading to this? How can we fix it? Because they can't be playing at this level going into the postseason and hope to make the run that they want.
So I know you hit on all kind of the main factors of concern for you and for kind of the Creighton faithful and the team as they head out to Seton Hall for Tuesday and then wrap up, of course, the final game in what has been an illustrious career for the senior class as well against Butler on Saturday for a 5 o'clock tip-off. Rank these in level of concern just from your perspective. Creighton's 3-point shooting, their ball handling and facing on-ball pressure, and then, of course, just figuring out what teams have thrown at them and adjusting to it.
I guess we'll see if Zugic getting healthy. He did make the trip. They stayed out there on the East Coast. They didn't come back between Xavier and now Seton Hall. So he's there. Hopefully the couple of days off have been able to get him back in the mix. That alleviates some of the ball handling and the ability to enter the ball in a Kalkbrenner that they struggle with. Because that's the other thing. It's not just the ability to put the ball on the deck and go create something. It's being able to handle and make those entry passes when you got guys in your face. And a lot of those guys have struggled with that this season. That's played into the inability to make Kalkbrenner the factor that he should be at times. So at this point, I'd probably say the 3-point shooting is I think the first 2 factor into each other is you have to be able to do one or the other. You've got to be able to knock down threes to combat the filling the gaps and swarming Kalkbrenner and getting up in your face. You got to be able to make them pay for that by knocking down shots. Or if you're not knocking down shots, you got to be able to put the ball on the deck and go make something happen and get Kalkbrenner the ball or whatever. So I think those are probably two sides of the same coin and are the most important thing. You got to do one or the other. And with the amount of 3-point attempts and kind of the way they play, as efficient as they are inside the arc, top 5 in the country in 2-point percentage. Last I checked, like, you've got to be able to find that right balance there. And if you're not hitting threes at the rate they are, you can't necessarily continue to take them at the rate. So they got to find that kind of sweet spot between continuing to let it fly and shoot with confidence, because that's what the program is, and not hurting yourself. Like, when you've got other options, you've got 7'1" center down there shooting 67% from the field. You got to play through him as much as possible. So I think those two are at the top of the coin, because again, those factor into the third one too. Right. Is that formula goes out the door if you do one of those other two, kind of solve one of those other two problems.
Yeah, and I think we saw it against Xavier too, especially when you have such a high volume shooting team and one of your wings gets clipped. It's kind of hard to keep flying high too. I'd also seen from the first Xavier matchup to this Xavier matchup, Creighton is one of the highest percentage shooting from the 3-pointer, but they're also, I think, 324th in the country in made 3-pointers in that span. So not exactly a good volume or recipe for success there. Of course, as we mentioned, Creighton on the road at Seton Hall Tuesday night, and then of course back at home, and you'll have coverage for Saturday.
A more competitive Seton Hall team. They obviously they're bottom of the conference. They're 2-16 in Big East play, but they beat UConn, and over the last 3, they've made Xavier, Nova, and St. John's all real fight to get those wins. So this is a team that Creighton should roll over if everything goes right, but at their place, at this point in the year, they're still fighting, right? So Holloway's done a good job of not losing his team after a rough season, but that's one where Creighton's going to have to go out and have to earn it. Kalkbrenner and Ashworth combined for 40 in the first game. You're going to need those two guys to be well to kind of set the tone for your team. And then Butler, we talked about the kind of the defensive communications, the attention to detail, all the issues that were there early in the season that they seemed to fix. This is another game where they have to be on point with that, because Butler can score. It's a top 50 offense. They haven't had a great season in terms of record, but
it was quite a fight the last time out too.
Yeah, they only won by 4. I mean, they got up, and then Butler played up down to the final whistle there. They had to execute at the end. So McCafferty gave them Bowen Kapke off the bench, gave them problems too. They did a good job on Kadeem Telford, or Jamal Telford, their kind of lead guy there, but they had other guys pop up and hurt them. So again, you got to see a good, strong, connected defensive performance to close out the regular season to feel good as they head out to New York for the Big East tournament.
And it feels like with every single game that gets a little bit closer, or especially that Xavier loss, maybe that level of desperation is not there, but you can definitely gain that when you put the pressure on yourself like they have this past week. Well, a team that didn't really look like they had to face really much pressure in their final game at home was the Creighton women. And did they have a back and forth? Yes, but the fourth quarter really showcased how good this senior class is. And man, did they need that game, especially coming off a pretty disappointing performance on Thursday.
Yeah, we talked in last week's show about kind of the opportunity that laid out in front of them with UConn. Obviously, beating them at their place isn't something people do. So it wasn't necessarily realistic to expect them to win, but you were hoping to see a better performance in that, because they did play them better than almost anybody else did the first time these two teams played.
But the first 4 minutes, they looked like one of the best teams to play UConn this season too.
Jumped out, knocked down a few shots early, and still was a 1-point game at the end of the first quarter. And then that UConn pressure we talked about in the first game that ultimately determined the outcome of that one. Creighton not able to handle that. You hoped having Keani Lockett back in the lineup would help in that regard, to have another ball handler out there, a pressure release for the team stars. And it just didn't play out that way. The pressure was relentless, and Creighton just did not handle it well. Second quarter, 27-12. Creighton only made 4 shots in the period. And then they got going a little bit in the third quarter and made some shots, but UConn continued to score at will too, 25-20. So gave up 52 points in the second and third quarters. That's not a recipe for success against a team as good as UConn. We knew Sarah Strong, they didn't have a matchup for her. She had 22-9. They did a decent job on almost everybody else there. Caitlin Chen played better than she did in the first game. That ended up being a nice little boost for them. But overall, I think Creighton, especially if you take away the points off turnovers and some of the easy ones that created, they defended well enough to give themselves a chance. They just didn't get the offensive performance that they needed. Maly and Jensen said they need to be superstars to give Creighton a chance. 18 points on 18 shots combined, only 3 of 12 from 3, and 9 turnovers between those two. So you needed those two. Those are the two that you would rely on so heavily to be able to compete on a level playing field with some of UConn stars, and it just didn't happen. Fortunately, Creighton did bounce back, like you said, to close out the regular season on a high note with that win against Villanova.
Yeah, and I think they knew coming into it was going to be maybe a bit scrappier, more physical than what they had anticipated it being the first time that they had played Villanova. But then coming into it, it turned into a 3-quarter fight that Creighton just dominated and ran away there at the end of the fourth.
Yeah, I mean, it was tight. They back and forth, a bunch of ties and lead changes in the first half. Creighton led in the third, and then Villanova kind of put together a stretch, making 6 out of 7 shots to make it a 4-point game there. Creighton stopped getting stops. Villanova got some confidence there, had a chance to turn into one that you're sweating down on the stretch. And then Creighton decided, no, we're not going to let this happen. I think Lauren Jensen, was it, that scored like 5 straight before a 3-point play to end the quarter. And then they opened the fourth quarter with a 10-0 run to stretch a 4-point lead out to 16. And then that was basically a ball game at that point. And I think Jim Flannery credited much of the kind of the knockout blow there to the defense of Keani Lockett, who they switched on to Jasmine Basco, who's a freshman for Seton Hall, averaging almost 16 a game this season. She had 24 points on 10 and 17 shooting in the first 3 quarters. Fourth quarter, only took 3 shots, only scored 3 points. And Creighton was able to pull away because nobody else really had it going for them. So good adjustment. Flan said probably should have made that call much earlier in the game, but made it in time to come out with the comfortable win and gave Creighton a chance to celebrate its seniors the right way, giving them a chance to check out together one final time, enjoy the standing ovation, share embraces with their teammates and coaches. So that was a pretty cool moment that they're able to, especially because the play that triggered it was Morgan Maly knocking down a 3. So going down, making her final shot at DJ Sokol Arena is, I think, a pretty cool moment. And then being able to share that with her team.
Yeah, you live and you learn if you're a Coach Flan, obviously. I think he was probably anticipating that game and all the celebration that was going to follow probably would have started a bit sooner, but it was also a big night for career milestones because you had 2 Creighton Bluejays surpassing 2,000 career points, one of them only in Creighton points. Of course, the other one we're waiting for Lauren Jensen to be able to get all of those points. She's still a few away, but regardless, it's
23 points at Iowa still count to her career total. They do
still count. No matter what anyone from Creighton says, they will still count towards her career total. But regardless, what does it mean, obviously, for these two to be a part of the same program, the same team for this stretch? And of course, they've had their NCAA tournament runs. They've had some key moments and big shots together, but to do it the same night, surpassing 2,000 career points, I mean, that's something that's really unheralded and I think kind of flew under the radar, especially from maybe the conference or national scene.
Yeah, and it's fitting for them to both cross that barrier together in the same game. I think really cool for them. And I mean, you look at they're both having career high, career best seasons. Lauren is 4th in the conference in scoring, and Morgan is 5th, like less than a half-point difference between them. So it's been those two all season long. The last 4 years, they've been leading the way for this program. Obviously, Emma Ronsick in that mix as well. And Jim Flannery said, like, this is the greatest class in Creighton women's basketball history with everything they've accomplished. Obviously, again, the extra year helps add to that resume, but that's happened all over the country, and they took advantage of it. Lauren obviously wasn't in that class initially, but she's been here for 4 full years now at Creighton after spending her freshman year at Iowa. So it's been pretty cool. And then Ronsick, who Flan said would still be here if not for the rare opportunity to play with her sister with that extra year of eligibility. She gave her 4 years to Creighton, accomplished so much here, was a great player. And then got a chance to go play with the younger sister at Colorado State. And those two have had a really good season for them. So happy to see that. But she's still kind of connected to this team, reaching out, still kind of feels a little bit part of it, even though she's not here. So it was pretty cool for everything this group has accomplished as the leaders to have that final moment to share together. And obviously with those two leading the way.
And of course, the final step for this team is maybe hopefully trying to overcome UConn one last time. So I'll ask you, Jacob Padilla. Obviously, the Big East tournament begins this weekend. Creighton was locked in the number 2 seed before the weekend even began. What are the hiccups that are in front of them before they have a third chance to knock out the Huskies?
So it is in the last handful of years, they've always left disappointed, probably ducked out sooner than maybe they would have wished or expected out at Mohegan Sun. So you look at the draw, and so the teams that played Creighton the closest outside of UConn during the regular season are Butler, Marquette, and St. John's. They're all on the other side of the bracket, right?
Yeah.
So it's funny how that worked out. Looking at Providence or Georgetown in the first round, and then DePaul, Xavier, Seton Hall again, obviously just played and beat by double digits there. So I think it's pretty good draw. Creighton's got to feel confident about their ability to make a run in this tournament to earn that third meeting with UConn and to build a little bit more momentum going into the NCAA tournament. So I don't know who I think the biggest hiccup there is just Creighton not performing up to its level. It really is. You look at the draw, it's about themselves and make sure they're performing at their highest level.
And of course, that first matchup for the Bluejays will be on Saturday in the quarterfinals. As Jacob mentioned, they will take on either number 7 Providence or number 10 Georgetown, seeded in the Big East tournament. Then they would follow with the semifinals and, of course, the championship on Monday night. So looking forward to seeing how this last week of the regular season wraps up for the Creighton men. Creighton women's definitely hoping to overcome some skeletons that they've had in tournaments past.
Yep, indeed. And we will be back hopefully to talk about some good things next week on Blue Jay Breakdown.
Yeah, fingers crossed. So for myself, Austin Jacobsen, Jacob Padilla, more Blue Jay Breakdown. You can check it out right now on all our channels across Hurrdat Sports.